Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wake Up Your Superhero. Put the power of your health back in your own hands. This 5-day global event will bring together medical doctors, holistic health practitioners, experts, visionaries, and wisdom keepers. We will hear the perspective of leaders and practitioners that will address what we need to put the power of our health back in our own hands, understanding that we each have the power to heal ourselves, discovering and recognizing that our main potential and the real hero is within us. Speakers will share their knowledge, experiences, and wisdom that will guide attendees to revitalize and reshape our lives so we can take a quantum leap toward creating marvelous health from within. I am your host and the creator of this event, Dr. Fernando Berrios, and today I am thrilled to present Jen Frey. Thank you, Jen, for being here today.
Thank you, Fernando. I'm happy to be here.
Always is a pleasure having you here. Jen Frey is a healer, mentor, earth advocate, and voice of the plants. She is the founder of Bridget's Way and is leading the planetary evolution. With over 20 years of experience with plant essences, energy work, and herbal practices, her private consultation and plant-based protocols are known for helping clients through emotional life transitions, physical health crises, and chronic conditions. Jen has dedicated her life to the spiritual path of plant work. Her apprenticeship certification program, ceremonies, retreats, and worship offerings are designed for people wanting to open their hearts, falling in love with plants, and deepen their relationship to the planet. She is the author of the forthcoming book, Communicating with Plants, Heart-Based Practices for Connecting with Plants Spirits, which is going to be launching by the end of June of this year. Well, Jim, the topic that you are sharing with us today is connecting with nature to become the author of your life. So, Jane, humans, in a way, we were forgetting that we are intimately connected with everything in our planet, therefore, to the plants. So let me start asking you these questions. What gifts do the plants have to offer for our healing journey?
So that's such a huge question, and we could probably talk for hundreds of years and not get to the answer of it. I mean, I think everybody understands at least the most obvious, right? They give us food, they give us the air that we breathe, they give us shelter, our clothing, our medicines. Even most of our pharmaceuticals were originally based on plant medicines. So, you know, in my work, we always say our very lives come from the plants. So that's the very foundation of it. But if we take the time to go even deeper, the plants, they give us everything for our healing. I mean, just by sitting with the plant now, of course, there's all these scientific studies being done that show just by being present with the plant helps us to calm and helps our bodies to heal. Breathing in their volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, has its own medicinal qualities. But in my work, I started as an herbalist, so I definitely know that side, but most of what we're doing is we're working with the energetics and the spirit of the plants. And so any question that we have, the plants are able to give us the answers. I mean, it's not like, you know, often my clients want to know, okay, so should I stay with this job or should I not stay with this job? Or should I wear blue today or black? You know, so they might not give us that exact answer, but they help us to come to know who we are so that we can find the answers within ourselves. And the other thing, I mean, again, we could be talking for a long time about the healing capability of plants, but the other big thing that's coming up for me around the plants now is that we know our current paradigm is not healthy for humans. I mean, as you said, we've forgotten how separate we are from nature, and not just nature, one another. We have this idea that we are rugged individualists and that's how we thrive. Mm-hmm. But we know we really thrive in community. And And we also know that our, like I said, this current mainstream paradigm is really unhealthy. And that's, white supremacy, patriarchy, like, you can name capitalism, colonialism, you name them all. It's just an unhealthy system, even for people who on the surface look like they benefit from it. And so the beauty with plants is that they don't operate in that system, or all of nature. They don't operate in that system. So they can help us to see another way. They help us to remember, because it's innate in each of us, that wisdom, but to remember what it is to be part of nature, to be part of a community, and to be truly healthy and whole. So to me, that's actually their greatest gift now. I mean, their pharmaceutical capabilities is fabulous. Of course, them giving us oxygen, we wouldn't be alive without it. All of that's great. But I think that ability to help us to remember who we are and help us to see a better future for ourselves, for all of humanity, for all of Earth, is just really profound.
Wow, beautiful. Especially, I imagine, in this time, isn't it? That we are,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the other great gifts of plants, is that they are our ancestors, right? So they were on the earth before humans, long before humans were on the earth. And we can see that plants always evolve before their animal counterpart. So that means plants have lived through so many different evolutions and so many different changing earth times. So that's another great gift that they give to us during this time of extreme earth change, is that they just help us to learn how to be adaptable and how to work with the change, because change is normal. The pace that we're experiencing might not be normal. But they can help us to, I mean, one, I think they help us to work so that we can try to slow down that pace, but two, they help us just to become more adaptable and really to learn how to thrive. That's to me is the key, is I want us to thrive.
So in a way, so how does nature help us to become authors of our lives?
Yeah, so I think that's a lot of what I was just saying there about shifting out of that paradigm. So with this paradigm, particularly with the capitalism and colonialism, to know, one, if we're looking at plants as their healing capabilities as far as ingesting them by their medicines, right? In our current paradigm, to know how to heal yourself, that's revolutionary. Because for almost all of us alive today, at least in the US and most of Europe, from the time that we're born, we're told that we have to give our authority to someone else. Somebody else knows better than us. And there isn't anyone who knows our body better than us. There are definitely, as I'm sure you know with all of your studies, there are definitely people that know a lot more about the functioning of a body and how the organs interact, or even how chemicals interact. But I think one of the limits of, and many people are starting to have this recognition, one of the limits of science, and particularly medical science, has been that mechanistic view, that just because we think we know how things interact, we often miss a whole other side that's not seen. And so the plants understand all of that. So yes, when we learn, one of my favorite plants that I teach people right away is plantain. One, plantain grows everywhere, and it's not platanos, not the plantain banana, but it's plantago major, or minor is the Latin name. So it's a green leaf, and really you can find it growing anywhere. I found it in the caldera at Volcano National Park in Hawaii. But I teach this plant because it's everywhere, and it's such good medicine. If you get a bee sting, you put it on, it pulls out the stinger, it pulls out the venom, it helps with snake bites. It's literally saved people's lives when they couldn't get to a hospital in time. So it's just teaching, particularly, I don't work with kids very often anymore, but when I do work with them, that's always the first plant, because teaching a child how that they have the capability to go to nature and everything that they need is right there and they can heal themselves is just like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's empowering. And so that's one way. I think I lost my strain there about how to become the author of your life, but I think that's what nature, that's one way, is through the medicines. Again, in this capitalistic society, it's like revolutionary to take that you have the power in your hands to heal yourself. And on top of that, there's a real big responsibility, because we also tend to, yes, we're told others know better than we do, but we also tend to hand our power over to others. Like, we don't want to be responsible for our healing. We'd much rather take a pill than to have to figure out what's the diet that's really best for my body. Or we'd like to read a diet book rather than do the internal work of what food really lights me up. So that's the other way that when we work with plants, when we work with nature, they just help to remind us who we are. And they help to encourage us to think outside those boxes. Like when we're in nature, and I always say in the heart, because we want to get in our heart first, because that puts us into this receptive mode. So it means we're more able to receive this information from nature. So when we're in there, we start to see the solutions to our issues that we wouldn't otherwise. And they just help, again, helping us. All of it is about getting to know yourself, getting to know who you are and what gifts you have to this world, because each of us has incredible gifts and they're each necessary. And so they just help us to remember that.
Yeah, that's true, especially if we don't take control and action on our part. So obviously we don't want to have results. Like you were mentioning about it, people, they are more used to go to the doctors, receive the medication or the guidance, but we never ask ourselves, what is the best for us? Because our body will tell us in one way or another, what is the best food, what is the best things that your body needs.
Right. Yeah, but our body tells us, but we have to listen. Like, we have to develop that skill to listen. And it's, it takes time and it takes effort. But it's always rewarding. So whenever my students or my clients, they start to develop that dialogue with themselves and with nature, it's empowering again, because you get control of your life. You realize that you get to decide how your life unfolds for you. And no matter what happens to you, we all experience trauma. I mean, there's trauma all around us, but how we interpret that trauma determines how we move forward. And it's just, to me, that's what gives me the most hope for our future, is when I see people become their own authors.
So what are simple ways that people can deepen their connection with nature?
Yeah, so again, I mentioned the heart. So I always have to talk about the heart, no matter what subject it is. And it's because the heart is such an incredible, we can say organ, but there's an intelligence to the heart. We're discovering that we have multiple intelligences in our bodies. And so when we get into what we call our heart space, it helps us to relax. As I said, we become more receptive. So we become more solution focused. So, oftentimes, like I had a client just recently that we were talking, and they have a challenge in their life. And so I suggested just a real simple, alternative. And they're like, no, we can't. It has to be this way. And so I was like, okay, we need to calm some things down before you can really expand, because they were just in a traumatized situation. So when we're in the heart, we're able to see so many more solutions than we would ever think is possible. And again, it's calming. It lowers the cortisol production. It deepens our breathing. So my quickest way of getting into that heart space is through gratitude. And this Heart Math, which they're actually in California too, they have lots of resources if anybody wants to look into this more. But they've been studying about the intelligence of the heart for over 30 years. So they're just fabulous. But gratitude is one of the greatest ways. So we just start listing all the things that we're grateful for. At some point, you're going to notice a physiological shift in your body. And so for me, that shift is, again, my shoulders drop. I mean, sometimes it's like inches. I don't often realize how high my shoulders are until I move into them. It's like, oh, that was kind of intense. So my shoulders drop, my breathing slows. Sometimes I actually it feels like something's opening at my heart. And sometimes that can actually be painful. It's just like, oh. And also for me, my hands feel really big. My feet feel really big. So we want to get to know when that physiological response happens. That lets us know that we're in our heart space. So then when we're in our heart space and we're out with nature, we're receiving the gifts, whether we're aware of it or not. So the book that I wrote is about plant communication, and I teach that. And I think, my dream is that one day that's taught in schools, or maybe that is not needed to be taught in schools. But plant communication is really important, but you don't even need to know how to communicate with the plants. If you're just sitting in your heart space and you're sitting with nature, then you're receiving the gifts. So that's one. But really the biggest trick is to spend time with them. Just spend time in nature without any purpose. Like we often think that when we're saying about go to nature, that it's like we have to go far, and to like some pristine place like Yosemite or Yellowstone, and two, we think it has to be a really long time, but we don't. 5 minutes can be important. Right now, as I'm talking to you, right behind, and I keep looking over there, I don't know if you see, but there's a sweet gum tree right outside my window, and there's birds there. So just looking, if you're at work and you're stressed, just if you're lucky to have a window in front of you, just look up and just spend 30 seconds looking, noticing nature that is around us. So I also talk about innocent perception being really important, because we think that we know everything, or that our brains are really good at pattern making. So if you ask somebody what color the sky is, they're automatically going to say it's blue. But if you really look at the sky, you can see all the different colors in there. Or same with the grass, we say it's green and we just think it's grass, but there's so many plants. There's ants in there. There's other bugs. There's might be mushrooms or moss. So training that innocent perception is so important. For a person like me, I live in a rural area, so I'm surrounded by nature. But for people who are in the city, again, there's this thought like I have to go away, but we're around nature. We are nature. Nature's everywhere. So it's just starting to train the eyes to look that when you're walking down the sidewalk, there's always a plant coming out somewhere, usually dandelion, but there might be somebody else. One of my favorite classes that I teach from time to time is I'll do an urban plant walk, and I take people around, and everybody's like, what? These plants? Like nobody can believe the amount of medicine and plants that grow around them. But it's really just changing your perspective to witness nature and see what else there, like get to know the birds that are around you. I'm laughing because I interviewed Leah Penniman over a year ago, and she's like, I'm such a plant person that when I asked her a similar question, her answer was to look at the sky. And it's like totally blown my mind open, because I never think about when you want to connect with nature to look at the sky. I always think to the plants, but now I'm on it. So like, yeah, look up at the sky. We all have access to that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, beautiful. That's beautiful. And it's something that I do. Well, basically more in spring, on summer, I sit, I have my patio, I go to my patio, I sit there, relax, I connect with the nature, connect whatever that is around me. There are birds, there are animals, and really change your perspective. It give you, like you said, give you a peace, bring you different connection with your life, and you come up and you maybe have even though better ideas. You come up, I stay there 10 minutes, sometimes 5, depends on my timing. but I am definitely help you a lot.
Mhm.
And the audience that they are listening, do that. Yeah, because we have in the corner a park. If you have some space outside in the patio, take advantage of that, because really the sun, the plants, the grass, the trees,
Mhm.
the animals, oh, that's a beauty. That's a beauty that we're supposed to really it take advantage of that,
Right.
because if we're gonna be always inside of a house without enjoying what is around us, obviously we are not enjoying life.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I 100% with you on that.
Yeah.
Well, will you please explain us the synergetic process of communicating with a plant and how the plants help us overcome anxiety, grief, fears, and limiting beliefs?
Sure. Sure. That's an easy question now. Well, before I explain all of that, I just want to say, because I was thinking about when I first started communicating with plants. So, from the time I was little, I heard about people who communicated with plants. And I always thought, like, my goal was maybe one day I'll be special enough to be able to communicate with them. And then later in life, I started, well, actually in junior high, I started my plant path of herbs and flower essences and homeopathy. And then when I had my kids pretty young, and that really dove me into herbs, because I didn't want to give them pharmaceuticals. So that's where I started. And once I started my herbal studies again, this concept of communicating with plants kept coming up, and I would go to teachers, and um, had some try to teach me like really difficult processes that to this day I still don't understand. And I just thought, there's something wrong with me. I'm not one of the special ones. And at the same time, I had been living, we had a farm and we had built our house. It was, to city people, it might not be small, but for us, it was 675 square feet. And in that was, I had 2 young kids, my husband, and then my nephew, who was 6'3", moved in with us in this like little tiny house. And I homeschooled my kids at the time. So like everybody needed me all day long. And my only opportunity that was for me was in the early mornings. I could get up before everybody else was awake, and I would go do my favorite thing. One of my favorite things is to pick berries. And at this time was our mulberries were out, which that's one of my favorite fruits from when I was little. So, there was a lot of difficult things going on in my life, and particularly because we took in my nephew, there was just a lot of drama, and I was trying to navigate all of this. And I would go out to the berries, like just so stressed. And by the time I would come in, whatever my problems were, I would have solutions, and I would be like, oh, we can do this. And I would feel so much better. And it took me way too long to realize that I was communicating with plants. Those answers were coming from the plants. And so since then, I've been on this journey to like really help everybody understand that plant communication, as one of my teachers is Pam Montgomery. And so she says, plant communication is your birthright. And it's true. We all are innately born. We're born innately able to communicate with plants. But our culture tells us that that's weird or wrong. And some people, fortunately, are able to maintain that throughout. But most of us have to kind of learn again. And it's not that the plants aren't communicating with us, because they communicate all the time, but it's us learning how they communicate. So it's almost like if we're in a relationship with people, you start having a conversation and you both think that you're having the same conversation, and then all of a sudden chaos comes out and you're like, wait, I thought we decided this, and they're like, no, we decided this. And so it's kind of like that. You have to know how to receive the information from the plants. And so that's what we're doing in plant communication, is just learning how to do that. And each of us has our own skills, so some people will learn it they'll see pictures or they'll get messages. Like sometimes I'll hear internal messages, but it's in a different voice than I use or a different language than I use. So that's how I know. So what I do in my classes, and actually the book that I wrote, we have activities to different ways to encourage people to interact with the plants. Because really everybody can learn how to do this. I've been teaching it for over 15 years, and I've yet to have anyone in my classes not receive a message. So that's what I'm going to say about plant communication, but please tell me the rest of the question about synergistic and anxiety, grief.
Yeah, if the plants can help us overcome anxiety, grief, fears, and limiting beliefs.
Yeah, so all of that's in my book, but I'm laughing because I didn't think I was going to talk about this today, but in 2011, my very beloved brother died suddenly. He was only 36 years old, and he was 18 months older than me, and it rocked my world. So can plants help you with grief? Without a doubt, they can help you with grief. That was, they were the ones that brought me back into this world and back into the living. And it was a really dark and challenging time, but all of it, whether it's anxiety, grief, all of it is, it's again, so the plants meet us where we are. So Fernando, you and I can be sitting down with the same, like we have sweet gum here, so I'll use sweet gum, right? So we can both be sitting down with sweet gum, and we could spend a whole weekend communicating with sweet gum, and at the end share our stories. There's a good chance that you and I will have common threads in there, and that's just kind of the core of sweet gum. But I can guarantee you'll get messages from sweet gum that I don't, and I'll get messages from sweet gum that you don't. And it's because sweet gum's meeting us where we need to be. He's helping us with whatever is most pressing on your heart at the time, or whatever your soul is needing at that time. And it's the same for me.
Mm-hmm.
The beauty of that means that we can, which is why I said in the beginning that we could talk for 200 years and still keep talking about this. The beauty is that just like that, because they meet us where we are, I can continue to communicate with the same plant and still get more information from them. Mm-hmm. Because like dandelion's one of my big loves. So dandelion I've worked with from at the time I was little, really, but as my life changes, dandelion reveals new information to me. Mm-hmm. So whatever it is that we're going on, if it's anxiety, if it's grief, when we go to the plant, the plant is going to help you to give whatever information is needed. Now there are plants who have affinities for that. So like for grief, one of the first plants I worked with was willow. And willow is just, is an amazing, weeping willow, the name is right in there. And we also know that willow is the how do I say it? Aspirin came from salicylic acid, which is inside willow. So willow, the medicine was originally made from willow. So willow has pain relieving pharmaceutical capabilities. But so willow has an affinity. Rose was the next plant that came in. But I needed willow to help reduce my tears, to help, because I couldn't function. I was just a sobbing mess at the time. So willow helped to reduce my tears. And then once I was able to be a little bit calmer, then rose came in, and rose helped to soften my heart and to just help me recognize the love that's in grief. We often, actually in this culture, we tend to not want to talk about grief. It has to be short, it has to be quick and back to work. Mm-hmm. But it's really a long process. And if we can give ourselves over to grief, and if we can allow grief to run through us, mm-hmm. then we recognize that it's really about love. Mm-hmm. And that if we didn't love so deeply, we wouldn't grieve so deeply. And so I'm going to butcher this, I know, but Martine Frechtel has a beautiful voice, or a beautiful book called The Smell of Rain on Dust of Grief and Praise. And he talks about grief being the ultimate source of praise for your loved ones, that we have to grieve them. We have to howl. We have to just cry and just let it all out. And that's how we honor them. And so so yeah, so the plants help us through all of that. And, they can bring up the emotions that we've been hiding. So limiting beliefs was another one you said. So one of the main plants I work with for that is Black-eyed Susan. And so they can bring up the things that we have been trying to avoid. And fortunately, not always, but the majority of the time, they do it in a very kind and loving manner because, in my experience, plants are incredibly forgiving, and they know that we're humans and they know that we make mistakes. And so they just accept that about us. So they tend to be very gentle, very forgiving, but sometimes they can really rock the boat. And particularly if you've been, which you may, I don't want to put you on the spot, but this may have been part of your experience too, was that, like when we're trying to not listen to really it's our soul calling or our heart calling, when we're trying not to listen to it and we're like, nope, we can't do that, or we can't make this change, things tend to get a little bit more dramatic. So when we're trying to ignore the messages that are coming to us, then when we work with a plant, sometimes it can get a little intense, but for the most part, they tend to be.
Well, in my case, that's important for me because I have many plants in my house, inside and outside, but I am the one to put the water to the plants because I notice that the plants really give me a peace. And when I put the water, obviously you talk to them because you look nice today, or whatever.
Right.
And so, but I noticing that really give me that peace that really at that point or at that moment that I am dealing, nothing will be relaxing. So that's a good point, how to learn how to communicate with them. I know that I talk to them a little bit and I connected with them and make sure that they are really well with the water and looks good, look beautiful. But there was my only point of view. I didn't know that I can have certain type of communication back from them.
Right. Yeah.
So how people can do more, like in my case.
Right. Well, again, I want to give you all the answers right now, and I can't, which is why I wrote a book, because that's my way of like, here, I really want to just give this to people and have people try it on their own. Because, and the reason why there's not like a direct answer is, like I said, so in my book, we talk about, I think, 16 plants. And so for each, overall, there's 17 activities in there. And so each activity gives us a little piece of the puzzle. And then at the end, we start to put some of those streams together. So, some of the things we do is just, of course, the very first step is always get into your heart space. Then the second step is to find a plant, like who is calling you? And that's the language that we use. Who is calling you? It's not like, what plant do I want to communicate with? Sometimes we do that. But most of the time, there is a plant that is really pulling at your heart. And that can be a hard thing for people to realize. So when I do workshops, I can have people coming from all over. And oftentimes there's always a handful of people who are like, I don't think there's a plant that wants to communicate with me, or like, how do I understand? And so for when they're coming to a workshop, it's just like, you may have already had a plant. It's like when you walk in and if somebody catches your attention, or sometimes it's almost like feels like a plant's waving to you, or like you'll see sometimes it's like a light beam is on a certain plant. And so chances are that plant's already getting your attention. When in doubt, we always go with the law of 3. So, if a plant crosses your path 3 times, then that means they're trying to get your attention. So you don't have to wait for the 3rd time. They can get your attention the first time, but definitely if they cross 3 times, and by cross, because that's kind of like a vague term, one of the big examples I always give is one of my students who lived in a city, and on her lunch break, she went to her local conservatory, and it was an orchid show, and she just loved the orchids. So she would spend all of her lunch break soaking up time with the orchids. And as she was walking home, this is in February in like near where I live, so it's really cold out, there's snow around. As she's walking back to work, sorry, not home, but back to work, here there's an orchid in the middle of the sidewalk, like an orchid flower. And she's just like, where'd this come from? You know, such a weird thing to see. So she's like, oh, how lovely, you know, here's a little gift. Well, she gets back to work and she worked for a hospital. And so there was a lunch that was given for some of the workers and there was leftovers. So she went over and here she got some salad and there was an orchid in her salad, which she had never had before. So that's like how a plant, you know, that's some examples of how a plant crosses your path. So those are the two big ones: heart, find a plant. Then it's just trying different activities. So the first one I always encourage people to do is to simply connect with the plant, you know, connect with your body, ground into the earth, breathe with the plant, remembering that your breath is coming from the plant being, but also changing your awareness so that your exhale is feeding the plant. And then realizing that as you're breathing in gratitude and you're breathing out gratitude. And then love. Breathe in love, you exhale love. And so often with my students, I'll have them sit there for an hour and just sit and be really observant. You know, thoughts come into people's heads, songs come into heads, images. You know, we're just really being observant about everything that's around us without any meaning. Because right now we're just trying to get information. So, you know, there'll come a time for discernment later, but in the beginning, we're just whatever. If a bird pops into a tree, you know, take note of it. There might be meaning there. And then from there, there's so many, you know, you can draw the tree, I keep saying tree because I'm looking at sweet gum, but it works with any plant. But, you know, draw the plant. As long as you know the plant's not highly poisonous, you can taste the plant, which is just a small bit of the plant, and you chew it really slowly and see how that affects your body. We journey, we do a sound journey or shamanic drum journey to go down to meet with the plant spirit. That's normally not the very first step, but you know, it's about halfway through. We'll do that so that they can gain other information. I'm trying to think what else we do. We sing with the plant and see how the plant responds, and there are different tones connected to the chakra. So sometimes when we sing those, it'll resonate more for a certain tone, and that gives us information too. We dance with the plant, see how the plant responds with that and what comes forward. There's another one I was going to say about singing. Oh, color, of course, the color of the plant can tell us. So we'll also, you know, look closely at the different, because sometimes there's colors there that you don't realize. So like I mentioned, Black-Eyed Susan, I think the center's black. And my first meeting, well, not first meeting with this plant, but first time communicating with this plant, I just kept feeling this energy at my crown chakra, and I couldn't figure out why. And I'm like, it's black. Why am I getting crown chakra? But then I looked with a magnifying glass and it was actually purple. The center of the flower was purple. So it was just like, oh, that's why, you know, it is connected to crown chakra. So that's a big list. There's no wrong way to communicate with the plant. And there's, you know, it's really what I try to do in my courses and again in the book is just give a variety of activities to interact with the plant and engage and start to see what works for you and what is your way of communicating. And then also I always encourage people to not get stuck with that, because sometimes something will come to us in a different way. And so just be aware of how it comes forward. I don't know if that was helpful, Fernando.
No, very helpful. And what about energies? For example, if a person with kind of like we put it that way, negative energy come to your house probably, and that's a plant close to where that person is sitting, and then eventually 1 or 2 days or 3 days after, that plant start dying, or at least start getting kind of like sick or something like that. That one has any explanation?
So are you asking this for a reason?
No.
Okay. I've never had this question. So honestly, I've only ever had that happen one time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a plant communication class. It was somebody else who came. So, so just to say in general, plants want to communicate with us. And so when we give them that attention, they get really excited. In fact, the typical, or not, I shouldn't say typical, but a common experience for students or people who are starting to communicate is it gets overwhelming because all of a sudden the plants are like, oh, here's a human who wants to listen. So, there's like 10 of them like, pick me. So that's common. So I just want to say, majority plants really love it. But I did have one experience several years ago where a person came to my land, and it was somebody who I didn't trust them. And their energy felt really negative. And I just had this feeling of like, you got to watch your back. And so they wanted to go for a walk on the land. And so I showed them around, and ragweed is, I'm not sure if ragweed grows out there, but ragweed is a big plant here. It's not necessarily a beloved plant because it causes really intense allergies. But ragweed is also a huge protector plant. So the land that I'm on now, we have to have a little balance because I don't normally pull ragweed, but it's been a little over the top. Like, we need to have a little balance here. But I had this one ragweed grew up really close to a sacred area. And so I was like, all right, you need to stay there. And I knew they were a good protector. And so this person saw the plant and pointed right at the plant and said, who is that and why is that there? And I was just like, well, that's ragweed. And I, told them that they're a good protector plant and everything. They left, and the very next day, the plant was completely black. And it wasn't sick before. So to me, I was just like, thank you, ragweed. You did your job. You really protected us and you kept that energy at bay. But that's the only time I've ever had an experience like that.
Well, I have one experience. One time I have a party here at home, and there were a group of people that they were sitting in the living room. And I have a plant on one of my tables that is big. It's been growing all over the table. So the next day, I saw a lot of leaves falling from the tree, from the plant. And so I said, what's going on here? And so I was thinking something there was too much water or less water. And I was checking and seeing every day. It happens like for several days that they were dropping many leaves. That's not normal to that plant. Right. So I said, well, it could be the people that they were sitting. I don't know. It could be. Yeah.
Yeah. So it does, as I said, that's my only experience with it. But I do know that sometimes plants will, it doesn't happen all that often, but sometimes plants will take on a person's illness or disease to try to help them.
Okay.
So sometimes that could have been it. It could have been a form of protection. It could have just been a fluke. Yeah. But it does happen that the plants can try to take on some of the negative energy for us.
Okay. Well, it's good to know. I imagine our audience, they have similar experience or other experience. Right. So that's important to really know about it. And that one came up just because for our conversation, and then I remember the situation, and so well, it's good to ask you and know about it. So since you mentioned in earlier that everyone has that innate ability to consciously communicate with plants. Mm-hmm. So we can really communicate with plants.
Yes.
That's our ability that we're born.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And like I said, it's really our culture that tells us to second guess it. But again, it's been a number of years since I've taught children this, but I used to teach plant communication classes to kids, and they get it so easy. First of all, as I said, I have people normally sit with a plant for like about an hour, maybe 45 minutes, but it's usually about an hour. Well, you can't ask a kid to do that, right? So I had them sit with dandelion for 5 minutes. And afterwards I was like, so what do you notice? What are you experiencing? And I remember this sweet little kid who's now this big, huge college person, but he put his hands on his belly and he's like, I feel so happy in my belly. And I was like, of course, dandelion 1 is a really good digestive aid. So it does help with the belly. It's like with the flower, it's a signature for the 3rd chakra. So which also helps us to be happy. Dandelion has other aspects too, like can bring up anger and all of that. But for the kids, that was what was coming forward, is just this happiness and the sunshine and the warmth. And so every child within 5 minutes had something to share, and it all made absolute sense. So, or at least it was something that I knew of from my own work with dandelion. So with kids, they get it so much easier. With adults, some adults also get it easy, and other adults, which is why I teach the classes, because sometimes you just need somebody to help you. I have other students that will come in and they're like, I don't think I'm getting anything. And so I just ask what their experience is. And once they start talking about it, I'm like, yeah, you're getting something. And then, so, because sometimes it's not all happy. Like we think that when we're working with the plants, it's all going to be airy fairy and joyful and just a ball of fun. But sometimes they can bring up, like I said, they bring up things that we may want to ignore. So sometimes they're bringing up situations in our family that were really hard for us. And so some students might say that's, it's not the plant, it's them, it's because something's wrong with them and they just can't get focused. But in the end, it's like, well, this plant, like for one, the example that's coming up is violet. One of my students was working with violet, and normally when you think of violet's a heart plant. The leaves are shaped like hearts, so we're thinking it's all about love, and there tends to be a lightness with violet. But for this student, it was bringing up all these really painful wounds, particularly with their mother. And when they came back and they were just like, I don't think it's working. And I'm like, no, that violet is about familial wounds. Violet is showing you that they can help you to heal those wounds. It's not like taking violet's going to cause more trauma, but it's working with violet will help to release them so that you can be free and be who you are. So yes,
Very interesting.
We all can.
And can I ask you, what plants do you have in your bag?
So right here, this is ZZ. And ZZ is a fairly new plant for me, but I was visiting some friends pre-COVID actually, and they had ZZ there. And I haven't actually communicated with them, but they always have my back. Even when I brought them in here, I always bring them in to this room, but normally in my house, they're right next to me when I sit on the couch at night. So ZZ is always next to me and does help to like just keep me calmer. And then on this side, this is snake plant or Sansevieria. And I'm sure Sansevieria grows in Peru, so I'm sure you know this plant, but it's a great protector plant. And also is, so I studied in Ecuador. And so in Ecuador, we work with Sansevieria for clearing your aura, like really clearing negativity from your aura. So and also is really good as a protector plant, great with EMFs. So I tend to have Sansevieria all around the house. And I was fortunate. I have my paternal grandmother was very fundamental Christian, but yet she had a whole windowsill filled with snake plants. So I inherited all of them. So I was like, you didn't realize you had all this protection around you. But, so yes.
Wow, that's good. That's nice. That's nice to know, to learn all this. And definitely our audience, they will be probably very fascinated about this. Can you just tell us about your work and your book that is almost launching in June?
Yes. So, well, I've spoken a bunch about the book, so the book, as I said, it's about communicating with plants and connecting with the plant spirits through heart-based practices. And so, as I said, we work with 16 plants. I give 16, I talk about 16 different plants in the book. I mean, I talk about more, but each chapter is focused on a particular plant. And these are plants that when I was working on this book, they really wanted to share. And so for each chapter, I talk about my experience with those plants and some of the lessons that they had to share with me, but also with everybody,
Mhm.
and what that looks like. And then at the end of each chapter, there's an activity, as I said, to help you. So the idea is that you can use this as your guidebook, so that a person can work with a plant and follow the activities throughout to basically have the experience of a plant communication workshop. Of course, it's not the same because you don't have the sharing and you don't have the support, but I think it's just so important that this information get out to as many people as possible, and a good amount of people are able to have a successful experience communicating with plants by following these activities on their own. I just want to give that caveat. I do say in the intro that if it's not working, because sometimes we just have a lot of doubts, or like I shared earlier, we might not realize that we're receiving the messages. So if that's the case, then you definitely want to work with somebody who does know how to communicate with plants, and just have them guide you through it, because you can do it. So that's the book. And honestly, I shared that example of mulberry. And when I was working, once I realized that, actually, even before I realized that I was communicating with mulberry, I got this idea to write a book about the plants. And I just thought that was bizarre. I was in my mid-20s, late 20s, and I was like, I have nothing to offer. There's so many more wise people out there to have to offer. And it took me a really long time to realize that it wasn't about me. It was the plants, that the plants wanted to communicate through me. And so that's what this book is. It's really, I hope I did them proud by sharing the messages they want to share, because the plants know that it's time. It's time for humans to, like, as you talk about superhero, but it's time for us to, like, really step into who we are and our connection with nature. And so they just want to encourage us on that path. So that's the book. My greater work, I have classes, of course. I teach the plant communication, but I also have bigger classes, an apprenticeship program where if people want to learn, so I have a healing practice where I do plant spirit healing and flower essences and energy hygiene. And so I teach people how to do these healing techniques for clients. And yeah, and so much more.
Good. No, but for our audience, it's important to know that they can pre-order the book. It's already in pre-order phase, and so well,
Yes. Yes, please. That would be wonderful.
that would be fantastic. Yeah, and you have a free gift for us. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah. So I have a little free book called about energy hygiene. So, energy hygiene is not something that we generally recognize in the US, but I mentioned it a little bit with Sansevieria here, that what I've noticed with my clients is that a lot of illness, a lot of disease, and what I mean by disease is more like dis-ease, so not feeling comfortable in your body or drama in the life, is really because we're not cleaning out our auras. So we now recognize the importance of washing our hands, hopefully, particularly after COVID. But clearing your auras for indigenous societies and for many traditional societies, that's always been really important. We're energetic beings. We're surrounded by energy all the time, and we pick up stuff. And so if we're not getting it out of our auras, so often it just creates chaos, anxiety, depression, all kinds of stuff. So it's a little booklet that talks a little bit about what energy hygiene is and some simple ways in which you can experience energy hygiene for yourself, as well as, going to see a practitioner to get some more deep energy hygiene.
Great. Everyone who are watching and listening can claim this gift by scrolling down below this video recording. You will find the link to the free gift right there below this video. Thank you so much, Jane, for everything that you have shared with us and for this fantastic gift. I am very grateful to you being here with us. So how can people contact you or get more information about your work and your coming book?
Great. Yeah. So my website, my company's name is Bridget's Way, and my website is bridgetsway.com. And I'll spell it, or maybe you'll have a link, but it's BRIG as in good, ID as in dog, way.com. And my email is jen@Bridget's Way.
Beautiful. And so people can really go there and looking for your work and your book too as well. And is there any final task that you would like to share before we close out this interview?
Oh boy, well, I would say, as always, try to get into your heart as much as possible. And wherever you are, just maybe take 5 minutes out of your day to gaze up at the sky or gaze down at the lawn, or watch the birds, and just soak in the gifts of nature. And when you're struggling and when you're in doubt, just go to a tree. They have so much to offer us. So and may we all just envision a better future. It's there.
Good, thank you. Thank you again, Jen, for your time and all that you have shared with us. Have a beautiful rest of the day, and thank you everyone for being here today.
Thank you.